Guys,
Good,
I'm
good.
good. I'm good.
I'm very miss you, Scott. I'm so glad to see you.
Well, we have been learning English since last
Yes,
time interview.
every day I voice Scott in my house. I listen news by Scott and I learn English by Scott video. Scott voice in my house all day.
this may lead to marital problems. Your wife might might be upset with that, but plus you don't want to learn English the way I speak it. I'm American. I ruin the language. You have to get it from somebody who's smart and Yeah, I've been listening to Scott's,
Um,
podcast, yeah, every day, all day long, multiple times. Yeah, I've been doing that too. So. Yeah, what I'm going to talk about, like my title is how far away are we, from World War III, and we said we're already in World War III. Are we already in World War III, Scott? yes, we are in World War III when the history of this, if the history of this is ever able to be written, because one of the dangers that we find ourselves in is that this conflict could turn nuclear today. That's how dangerous it is. And if there is a nuclear war, either you're going to be dead or wish that you were dead. The life that you enjoy now will not exist. There won't be internet, there won't be electricity, there won't be food, there won't be a warm house with heat. Um, you'll be driven back to literally the Stone Age because everything will be destroyed. And the planet will become poisoned with radiation, and there will be nuclear winter, permanent ice sheets for decades. So, that's the consequence that we're talking about here. Up until now, I think we've had people glibly say, well, it could lead to World War III, or, well, the Russians are bluffing, or NATO's bluffing, or I don't think anybody's bluffing, and I think we're already at war. The question now is how to prevent this war from becoming a nuclear war. Um, I spoke with the deputy Russian ambassador to the United Nations, Dmitry Polyansky, last week. And I asked him, the benchmark that seems to be used when talking about the danger of nuclear war is the Cuban Missile Crisis. Everybody says, oh, that was the closest we came to a nuclear war, um, et cetera. Um, he is in agreement that the situation we find ourselves in today is orders of magnitude more dangerous than the Cuban Missile Crisis. Um, First, the number of weapons that we possess today and the lethality of these weapons is far greater than that existed in the arsenals of both the United States and then the then Soviet Union back then. Second, we were talking to one another. Back then, President Kennedy was able to communicate directly with Nikita Khrushchev. Ambassadors existed who were coming to the White House, going to the Kremlin, talking to one another, meeting at the United Nations. There was a back channel, a very active back channel of communications. And it's because of these communications that catastrophe was avoided. Today, we're not talking to the Russians. The Russians aren't talking to us. There is no communication. Um, which means there's no opportunity to resolve issues, um, through dialogue. And that at the end of the day, this is going to be resolved on the battlefield um, through violence. And that is not the solution because if we take that path, the path only leads in one direction, and that's the use of nuclear weapons by both parties. Russia's nuclear doctrine has been redefined. The threshold for the use of nuclear weapons has been lowered, uh, lowered so much that NATO has already crossed the threshold. I don't know if people understand that, but doctrinally speaking, the Russians believe they are justified in using nuclear weapons right now. The fact that they aren't using nuclear weapons shows, a patience and pragmatism and and a level of humanity on the part of the Russian leadership that doesn't seem to exist in the West. But again, as an American, I loathe the concept of being beholden to other nations for my security. The fact that I have to be grateful that Russia has decided not to use nuclear weapons is not a good situation. I would rather that my country was not embarked on policies that led Russia to consider the use of nuclear weapons. Um, but yeah, this is a very dangerous. World War III has started already. American missiles are hitting Russia, and Russian missiles are hitting American proxies in Ukraine. And who knows, by the end of the week, Russian missiles could be striking NATO.
Mm-hmm. By the end of the week, and today is like Wednesday, right?
Well, I guess in a week's time, Russia has cleared the airspace over the Kapustin Yar missile test range. That's where the um, Oreshnik missile was fired against Ukraine earlier this week, or and that clearance of the airspace is from now until November 30th.
Mm-hmm.
So we have what is today, the 26th,
27th.
27th. We got 3 days to live.
Mm-hmm.
Yay,
Yeah.
enjoy it. Happy Thanksgiving. Eat your turkey and then die. Because that's, I mean, literally that's where we're at right now. And nobody seems to care. Nobody in the United States seems to care that this is the direction that it's happening, that's going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been listening to your, podcast and Colonel McGregor's. Like, he is very, very concerned too. But like, I feel like nobody else, like even Trump's team, I feel like Trump didn't say anything about it yet. He used to be like very concerned, and he said we are very close to World War III. But recently, I have been watching him and trying to see if he gave some signal, but I've seen nothing. So yeah, I'm worried too.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean that the two big there's three issues. One
mhm,
is educating the people on the danger of nuclear war,
mhm,
because I think people just don't believe it's real, don't believe it can happen. It's too outrageous to believe that everything that we have built in this life
mhm,
will be taken away from us this quick. And so we live in a world of delusion, where
Yeah.
we've deluded ourselves into failing to recognize the threat. The next question is a very important one. What can be done politically to get the Biden administration to stop?
Mhm,
How do we mobilize um, Democrats who are frustrated by the failure to win on November 5th, maybe demoralized, and not wanting to be seen as doing anything um, to help MAGA Trump out? How do we get them engaged to stop
Yeah.
their president? And if we can't get them, what can be done? I point out that in January 2021,
Mhm,
then President Trump was impeached by Congress because of what happened on January 6th.
mhm,
Um, I find what's happening today to be a far greater crime than anything Trump was accused of on January 6th. The Biden administration, at the behest of Tony Blinken, it appears, um, is not consulting Congress and is taking America down a one-way path towards war after an election where the American people said, we don't want war. This is an impeachable offense. Can Congress impeach Biden? Can Congress impeach Blinken? People will say, well, what's the use? The Senate will never impeach. You're missing the point. It's an educational forum. You see, when we impeach, we now get to put Biden and Blinken on trial. They have to answer questions about what they're doing, why they're doing it. And
mhm,
maybe the American public will say, no, we don't want a war with Russia. We don't want a nuclear conflict. So that's the third question is, how do we get MAGA to engage before January 20th? Yes, on January 20th, President Trump becomes President Trump. But
mhm,
until then, he's President-elect Trump.
Yeah.
And there are many people who are concerned about the Logan Act, for instance, which prohibits private citizens from engaging in negotiations on behalf of the United States or and such. And even though he's President-elect Trump, he's still a private citizen, and he's not legally allowed to engage in policy negotiations that are the singular purview of the Biden administration. But that doesn't mean he can't speak out or his team can't speak out and say, no, we are against this. This isn't what the people wanted. You need to stop this. How do we get MAGA engaged? These are three very fundamental, issues and questions out there, and we're searching for the answer. I can tell you that on December 7th in Washington, D.C., at the National Press Club, I am organizing a Say No to Nuclear War gathering. And it will have three panels in which we'll have very prominent speakers addressing these three issues:
Mhm.
nuclear war, how to stop Biden, how to engage MAGA. It'll be live streamed, and we hope to engender a national debate about this and maybe create some sort of political momentum that
Mhm.
can put the brakes on nuclear war, because otherwise we're going to die. I mean, that's the reality of it.
Yes, I've been thinking about, why American people is not angry as is not doing anything, why nobody is doing anything, organize a protest or something like that. And then I saw you are doing it December the 7th. So thank
Well, I'm
you very much.
trying. I'm trying.
Mhm.
We were going to do an outdoor protest. That was my original idea. Uh,
Mhm.
but the system doesn't make it easy, and the weather doesn't make it easy. So a combination of trying to get permits and the logistics of bringing people in on short notice right after a holiday.
Yeah.
Um, it's sort of counterproductive if you declare you're going to have this demonstration and then you go out there and you have 20 cold people shivering in the cold saying no nuclear war. It looks as though nobody cares, but we're going to host this at a very prestigious venue, the National Press Club. We're going to stream it live. We hope to have millions of people watching, and we'll be educating people and empowering people to take the action necessary to save their lives.
Yeah. Maybe that's even better event than
I want
live
to ask
broadcast.
about the sport. No long time ago, Russian Minister Lavrov say, uh, the Trump will go to the president, and the Trump's administration no will change more politic between and the administration Biden. 对于the no big different,
Correct.
no big different. And maybe the situation right now uh, have a agreement with Trump. What do you think?
Maybe the situation is what?
The situation around about missile Areshkin, and the attack Russian.
Well, I agree with Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, that right now there doesn't appear to be any difference between Biden and Trump when it comes to Russia. Trump hasn't announced anything radical, a departure from. In fact, he has, you know, two people that he's designated for positions in his administration. The national security advisor and this counterterrorism advisor, Sebastian Gorka. The national security advisor designee um, basically said that he has consulted with Jake Sullivan, the current national security advisor, and that there's no difference between what the Biden administration is doing and what the Trump administration would do regarding Ukraine and Russia. So there's the answer. There's no difference. Uh, and Sebastian Gorka came out and proceeded to denigrate the Russian president, calling him a thug. Um, that's not conducive to positive talks. The Trump administration right now, I believe, lacks a vision. They don't, and this is the danger. My dog agrees that the Trump administration lacks vision. The 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 big danger is they literally don't have any qualified experts about Russia talking to Donald Trump right now. He's getting advice from the worst possible sources, and and he lives in a world of delusion. A fantasy world where he believes America, the American president, has the ability to pressure Russia by a phone call after you insult the Russian president by calling him a thug. Um, I'm not a doctor in human psychology, but I would say that just from my perspective, the person that comes at me with their hand extended in friendship, with a smile on their face, is going to have better luck talking to me than the person who scowls at me and calls me a thug. Um, so the Trump administration self-destructing before they even get there. This is a very dangerous situation because they will be looking for change. No administration wants to be trapped in the policies of the past. They'll be looking for change, and they have this misguided notion that they can achieve this change by being a tough guy, by posturing, by threatening Russia. That's just not going to work. And the failure of that policy could lead them to double down on this, to threaten even more, until the point is if we manage to avoid a nuclear war between now and January 20th, it becomes all but certain we're going to have a nuclear war after January 20th. So, again, a very dangerous situation brought about by ignorance. Again, the Trump administration has no real Russian area expertise amongst the people that are advising Donald Trump.
Yeah, like recently I watched an episode. I think it's Dugin debate with Pepe Escobar. Like Dugin think Trump is the one, is the only Western leader that Russia think it's worth to talk to. So I'm thinking maybe Putin still know, the people around Trump. It's not Trump. I hope he still wants to talk to Trump about, world peace.
Well, I'm sure that, again, I can't speak on behalf of President Putin, and I would never attempt to. um, but I'm positive that based upon what he has already said, that he is open to negotiations that are based on reality.
Yes.
So he continues to be open to negotiations based on reality. But
Mm.
a negotiation requires the other party to be willing to have a discussion. Right now, the Trump administration wants to dictate outcomes. There won't be a discussion. They have the answer. They're dictating it. Russia must follow. That will never work with Russia, especially Russia in this stage. And then the other thing is, what is the motivation of the Russians to talk? Right now, the United States has a policy that says that they're seeking the strategic defeat of Russia through the proxy conflict in Ukraine.
Mhm.
If the Trump administration doesn't change that underlying policy, what is the motivation of Russia to talk? Why would they ever engage with a party that wants to defeat them strategically? This is why there is no connectivity with the Biden administration right now, because why would the Russians cooperate with an entity that's trying to destroy them? And so the Trump administration has to change their mindset and their approach to have any chance of taking advantage of President Putin's desire and willingness to actually have constructive, realistic negotiations.
Exactly. I think a way he told me about the seminar, what's the motive to bring Putin to the negotiation table, what to negotiate.
Yeah. Well,
We
and the
do
other
have.
thing is there has to be, what do you want to achieve through this negotiation? Is it peace? Is it better relations? Or, as the history has shown us, is the United States using negotiations to achieve a dominant position in a post negotiation environment? The Russians aren't going to let the Americans come out of any negotiation in a dominant position. In fact, when it comes to Ukraine, Russia will insist that it has a dominant position because it will have defeated Ukraine. Um, that is the reality. Um, you can't change that, and Russia's not going to at this juncture, uh, I believe, agree to any negotiation premised on Russia taking a posture that could only be achieved if Russia was defeated.
Mhm.
Russia isn't defeated. Russia is actually victorious
Yes.
and prevailing on the battlefield. And they've made tremendous sacrifices to get to this point to achieve their stated objectives. I don't see Russia yielding on anything substantive, that they will insist that what they wanted to get out of the special military operation, they do in fact get. They're willing to talk about post conflict relationships and things of that nature. But when it comes to Ukraine, Russia and Russia alone gets to dictate the future of Ukraine right now. Not
Mhm.
Ukraine, not NATO, not the United States.
Mhm. Yeah. Wait, do you have other questions?
Yes, I see the video from Ukraine show the Areshin missile that attacked the Ukraine was empty height, was empty.
Empty head.
Yes, yes, yeah, was empty head. What do you think?
Well, we know it wasn't empty because we saw 36 submunitions strike the Dnipro factory. The I think what they might be saying is that these warheads didn't have any high explosive in them. Um, but then they missed the whole point of the warhead. The warhead appears to be designed to deliver um, a non-explosive kinetic round, meaning that the damage is done by the speed generated by the round as opposed to the explosion. And I just had a conversation with Theodore Postal, um, who is an MIT professor, an expert in these things, and his calculations show that a superheated slug of metal coming in at hypersonic speeds will generate an explosive value that is 1.5 times the weight of the projectile. So, for instance, if you have a 100 kilogram projectile hitting the ground, the explosive value of that will be 150 kilograms of high explosive, which is consistent for what I believe the round was designed to do. This round was not designed to destroy an underground factory. This munition was designed to destroy um, a NATO or an American ballistic missile um, system that's already deployed in the field. This was designed to come in and saturate with great precision specific areas using the superheated slugs to deliver direct kinetic kill to a target. And in that, it seems to have been a very successful weapon system. But the Ukrainians, they can say what they want, but Russia fired a missile and it hit its target, and there's nothing Ukraine can do to stop it. That's the reality. They can try to describe the weapon any way they want to, but the bottom line is the weapon hit its target, and Ukraine will never be able to stop future weapons of this nature from hitting the targets they want to hit.
If if negotiation is not the it's not the end of the Ukraine-Russian situation, what will be just escalation, endless escalation, or where are we heading?
We're heading to uh, thermonuclear war. What do you mean where we're heading? This is an existential conflict between two nuclear armed powers.
Mhm.
It requires one or both to back down. The United States has a policy right now to strategically defeat Russia using Ukraine as a proxy. That policy is failing because Ukraine, the proxy, is losing. They can't accept that outcome. So now they're trying to increase pressure on Russia to to achieve a Russian defeat. Russia will not allow itself to be defeated. So when both sides say we refuse to be defeated, and you keep pushing them, eventually the only resource they'll have left is nuclear weapons. And then one or both will use those nuclear weapons, and we will all die. That is the direction we're going. I don't know what, unless NATO admits that they've lost, unless the United States admits that there's nothing they can do to save Ukraine, um, they will continue to pursue these policies until which time either they are compelled to use nuclear weapons to stop Russia, or Russia is compelled to use nuclear weapons to stop them.
Yeah. I feel I still have hope on Trump. I feel he will like because he sees Ukraine Russia war differently than the Democrats, Biden administration. He still wants to stop the war at least.
But that's not what his national security advisor designee said.
See, yeah, that's
He said the
exactly.
exact opposite. So it makes me wonder
Yeah.
um, what Trump stands for, etc. Now's not the time for ambiguity. Now's the time for clarity. Trump
Hmm.
needs to be very clear about what
Yes.
he wants to accomplish. And he also needs to be very clear that what the Biden administration is doing is counterproductive to what he wants to accomplish, that they're working at cross purposes. And if he doesn't make that clear,
Hmm.
then the assumption is that he supports what the Biden administration is doing. And
Hmm.
again, when you have that assumption backed up by the statements made by Trump appointees, that's clearly what the case appears to be, that Trump supports what Biden's doing because that is the policy that Trump will assume if he is sworn in. And I say if because we may not live that long.
Yes. Well, frankly speaking, I'm a very, strong Trump supporter, but I'm very disappointed about, whatever his appointees said, like recently. And I didn't see anything, toward the peace, but I only see the direction to escalation,
Yeah.
like even so.
When you have a policy posture when it comes to the military, which is peace through strength. I mean,
Hmm.
it sounds good, but what does it mean? Especially in a situation like Ukraine, where the U.S. has no strength. We have been defeated by the Russians. If we want peace, it needs to be peace through wisdom, not
Hmm.
peace through strength. And Trump is not showing himself at this juncture to be a wise man.
Hmm. Well, I have another question. Like, if war breaks out, will there still be a like power transfer, between Biden administration and Trump administration? And does it make a difference if it happens? Oh no.
I mean, we have had presidential elections during time of war in the past, and the peaceful transition of power always takes place.
Hmm.
Um, I think the only thing that could stop it is if a nuclear war broke out and the mechanism of government collapsed, and we had to go into some sort of emergency. Um, it There might not be an immediate transfer of power because it might not be practical to do so. Um, but that's an unprecedented situation right now. If the United States is still functioning as a modern nation state on January 20th, there will be the peaceful transfer of power between Donald
Hmm.
Trump and Joe Biden, because that is what the Constitution demands.
Okay. Well, I hope we live till then, January 20th.
Yeah, so do I. Yeah, so do I.
Yeah. It feels like it's a long period, although it's only, like a month, two
Month and a
months,
half,
a
but
month and a half.
that's a
Yeah.
lifetime
We're
because
counting our days. Like every day last last week, me and we did a podcast and we're talking about maybe we only have 2 weeks left
or less.
or less. Wait, do you want to talk about Russia? Like how Russian people say things and how do they feel?
Well, I mean,
Russian,
again, go ahead.
don't think anything.
Mm.
Because I remember 23 November was the first attack to Kursk, and after answer missiles from Russian Arishkin, 25 November was the second attack to Kursk. And today I see the information in Russian. Prepare second attack missile to Ukraine. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow will be.
I mean, Russia to Ukraine.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, I think the big question is when will Russia strike NATO?
Mhm.
I believe that there's at least one, maybe two more rounds of escalation where Russia can strike Ukraine. I believe the final strike against Ukraine would be a strike against Bankova Street, the seat of government in Kiev, to destroy it. But if after that the Ukrainian government continues to allow the United States, Great Britain, and France to use Ukraine as a means of attacking Russia using their weapons, then Russia will have no choice but to strike NATO, and that's when that's when all the problems begin. And right now, the West doesn't seem to be backing down from the. I think when the Russians fired the Oreshnik missile, they were hoping that that would deter the West from continuing to escalate, but that deterrence has not succeeded. And so now the question too is the next Russian attack. It can't be the same. It can't be just the same. It has to be something bigger,
Mhm.
um,
Yes.
something that does tremendous amount. Now they have options. I mean, the weapon that they could use can deliver the avant-garde, which is a hypersonic warhead with great destructive capability. Conventional. It doesn't. I'm not suggesting it would be nuclear. They have other thermobaric warheads that'll be very. They have something they call the father of all bombs. It's a giant thermobaric warhead that can do extensive damage. So they do have non-nuclear options. I think Russia's hesitated to use those because of the destruction and of the, you know, they don't. You can say what you want about the Russians, but so far they've shown themselves to be very restrained about destroying um, culture, cultural targets. And Kiev is a cultural city. It's a hero city, by the way, of during Soviet times. Um, and the Russians would be loath to destroy that city, but they may be given no choice. Um, but we'll see. It'd be very interesting to see what kind of missiles Russia uses in this next response. Very interested to see that.
I feel like, to stop this war, something has to be changed in NATO or United States. I feel like Russia has no choice, because they are defending their country, their own security.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
NATO and
the initiative is with the West, and this is why political action here at home is so important. This is why the American people have to become engaged and become active,
Mhm.
because you can't wait for Russia
Yeah.
to take the initiative. The initiative has to be taken by the West in constraining Ukraine. But when you constrain Ukraine, then you have to deal with the political fallout because Ukraine apparently was scoring political points when they criticized the Biden administration for tying their hands. You say
Mhm.
you want to help us, you say you want us to win, but you tie our hands when it comes to doing what we believe needs to be done to achieve this victory, which is these long range strikes with ATACMS, Storm Shadows, etc. Um, but the reality is these weapons don't change anything. They're not that destructive. Russia shoots down most of them, but it's the political dynamic of having a weapon that's built in America and is empowered by American intelligence to
Mhm.
strike targets picked by America inside Russia. That means America's attacking Russia.
Mhm.
So even if the attack isn't successful or isn't threatening the national security of survival of Russia, politically Russia can't allow this to continue. They have to stop it. And so that's where we're at right now. Is the Russians are engaged in a form of political warfare. They have to do something that resonates politically to reestablish deterrence. Um, and I think that's going to require Russia inflicting a lot of pain on Ukraine, a lot of pain, and that's tragic.
Yes, yes, yes.
Now the Middle East has a temporary ceasefire, right, for like 60 days. I wonder like why all of a sudden they have a ceasefire over there. Is it because of United States cannot support both battlegrounds? Oh, I don't know.
The United States can definitely support both. The problem was politically for Benjamin Netanyahu. He had to get a ceasefire to survive. The other thing is, from the perspective of Hezbollah, because the ceasefire only deals with Lebanon,
Mhm,
they are more than just a resistance movement or a terrorist organization. They're a political party. They're
mhm,
part of the Lebanese government, a very critical part of the Lebanese government, and therefore they are responsible for all Lebanese people.
mhm,
And so when you have Israel engaged in attacks that are killing thousands of innocent Lebanese civilians, the pressure is on Hezbollah uh, to make sure that they are doing everything necessary possible to save the lives of these Lebanese civilians. And so I think they were at the point where um, politically it would be difficult for Hezbollah to continue this fight unless uh, they can, influence the political dynamic within the minds of the Lebanese people that the blame for this continued struggle is solely Israel. I think up until now, the Lebanese have been sympathetic to the Hezbollah cause, but Hezbollah, when offered an opportunity to bring about a ceasefire, could not walk away from that opportunity without severe political damage at a time when they can't do it. I don't believe Israel will comply with this in the long term. This ceasefire will fail, but that will only further embolden and empower Hezbollah and weaken Israel. But as things speak, the Israelis needed this more than anybody. Um, Benjamin Netanyahu was, he's under new indictments, new prosecutions, and if this conflict continued, it become politically impossible for him. The conflict in Hezbollah continued to be politically impossible for him to stay on. So this buys him some time to try and come up with solutions to the other problems. But uh, given that the majority of members of his cabinet are against this because they believe in greater Israel, they believe that as long as Hezbollah exists, there will always be a potential threat. They believe that Israel must take out Iran. Um, it'll be I just don't see the ceasefire holding. I see it collapsing. I see Israel breaking this ceasefire within a month, before the 60 days, definitely.
mhm, mhm. He was talking to me yesterday. He said now it's if President Xi in China, if he wants to attack Taiwan, now it's the perfect time for him.
Yes. Right now, if we started the war between Korea and between China and Taiwan, and war in Russian and Ukraine and Israel, Palestine, four places together will be war. How long time American can keep this situation?
The United States, even though we are quote unquote an empire in decline, we are very powerful. We have a very powerful military. Um, it's not as powerful as it used to be. There was a time when we could fight and win two and a half wars at the same time. At least we believed we could. We could fight a war in Europe and win. We could fight a war in Asia and win, and then we could fight a holding action in the Middle East until victory in one of the other two fronts was achieved, and then those forces would be brought in, and we would win the third conflict. Today, we have trouble even talking about winning one conflict. For all the money we put in our military, the actual numbers of deployable troops is quite small. Definitely not big enough to win a war in Europe using conventional forces. Definitely not big enough to win a war against China and Taiwan, a war in the Middle East, or a conflict with North Korea. Um, and the idea of trying to fight four wars at once, it's already exhausting us. We had the admiral responsible for the Pacific Fleet tell the Biden administration, you can't send any more ATACMs and javelins and high technology equipment to Ukraine because you're asking us to give up our stockpiles that we would have to use if there was going to be a war with China. You're weakening us. We have nothing left to give. Um, and that is the reality. I don't think the United States can fight and win a major war, and herein lies the danger. What happens when the United States gets engaged in a fight we deem to be existential in nature, and we cannot prevail using conventional weapons? Nuclear weapons become the option. Um, as for Taiwan, though, again, if I were advising President Trump, I would say that the Chinese have historically said that military reunification is the absolute last measure. That their preference is peaceful and they have patience, um, and that the best thing for us to do is to, as the United States, is to avoid confrontation with China over Taiwan, um, to work with China and Taiwan to normalize relations so that economic activity is not interrupted and create a situation that the people of Taiwan could thrive economically, um, retain their own identity, but still be part of, officially part of China. I think the Chinese government, in Beijing would definitely approve something like this, and this would be the best situation possible. The United States could still retain considerable influence in Taiwan. And because we were peacemakers, not war makers, we would now have additional influence in Beijing because the Chinese would be inclined to talk to us because we had a positive outcome that brought about peace, not war. But we don't have it. I criticize Trump for not having any Russian experts around him. There are no Chinese experts around Donald Trump either. He has ignorant people who are prejudiced against China, who believe that we can defeat China in a trade war. Um, and if they're that ignorant, then I have to believe they're also ignorant about the consequences of a war with China over Taiwan. I personally believe that if China makes the decision to capture Taiwan, that the war would be over in a week. That China has learned the lesson of Ukraine, and that if you're going to do this, you have to do it with all of your power at once and not half of your power slowly. It needs to be everything to solve this problem because if China can solve the Taiwan problem militarily in a week, the United States won't be able to respond for at least a month or more.
Yeah.
And so by the time the United States responds, there's a fait accompli has already occurred, Chinese victory. So I think that's the direction that I would be. If I were the Chinese, I would be looking for peace. But if there's going to be a war, the war will be fought with everything China has and fought as violently as possible to achieve the quickest possible outcome in favor of China.
Yeah, you just mentioned the peacemaker. I feel like President Xi's interest now is not to grab Taiwan by force, but be a peacemaker all over the world. And through, that process and to influence, to make a bigger influence around the geopolitics and everything. I feel like his ambitions grow, more, further than Taiwan.
There's no doubt about that, but I think he's also been very clear that Taiwan is China and that he will not tolerate any
Yeah.
development in Taiwan where Taiwan um, seeks independence or acts as if it was independent.
Mm-hmm.
And if that happened, then the Chinese military will be ordered to respond. But I agree with you that China is not looking for a fight. China is looking for peace because that plays to China's strength. China is not a global military power. China is a global economic power. And
Mm-hmm.
China succeeds by building bridges, not by building bombs. Um, so I think Xi Jinping has made it clear that that is the direction he wants to go with China and how China interacts with the world to continue to be the world's greatest builder of infrastructure. There's no other country in the world that builds infrastructure globally like China. Um, they control supply chains, which means they control basically their foot is on the gas pedal of the global economy. Um, uh, China has worked very hard to get to where it's at, and there's no reason for China to throw that away by going into a war that they don't need to fight. So I think war with Taiwan would be the absolute last thing China would want. But if it's going to be fought, I think it will be fought decisively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got what you say. Wait, do you have other questions too, Scott?
Uh, Scott, you do very great work to work to for understand between Chinese, Russian, American people each other. Because I think right now today's situation uh, from the people cannot understand each other, cannot understand each other, cannot laugh each other like a neighbor, like other people. So if in the future, Chinese, American, Russian will know each other very good, I think no will be any conflict. So I want Scott, keep you strong, healthy. You need every people.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Look, I've always believed that one of the mantras that I operate under in life is that you can't solve a problem unless you accurately define the problem. If I say that if the problem is a tree that needs to be chopped down, but I say that the problem is a bush that needs to be trimmed. If I go trimming the bush, I'm not solving the problem. Um, but in order to identify the problem, you have to be knowledgeable. I mean, one of the great problems that we have today is that Americans aren't as informed about Russia and China as we need to be. Is there problems between Russia and the United States? Yes. Are there problems between China and the United States? Yes, there are. And some of these problems aren't our fault. It's not as though, we're always wrong. We're wrong a lot, but we're not always wrong. Um, but in order to have a conversation, I have to
Yeah.
understand where you're coming from, why you're doing what you're doing, what motivates you to do that. What is your belief system? What are your values? What do you want to achieve? Is there an alternative path to get to you to where you want to go that doesn't run over what I do? This requires tremendous amount of insight, knowledge, and information that can only be had by talking to the other side, by going over there and learning about them, um, and not as an enemy, but as a friend. See, friends are allowed to have disputes. I have friends, and we argue and we disagree, but we're friends. And so what we say is, hey, let's get together for a beer and have some chicken wings and just talk. And so we'll talk it out, and next thing you know, we're in agreement. Yeah, okay, sorry about that. That was a little misunderstanding on my part. Let's do this. Okay, everybody good? Yep. Want to meet next week? Boom, there you go. You solved it. Um, marriages. Marriages are the ultimate form of friendship. If you think a marriage lasts forever without any tension or fights, you don't know anything about marriage and the dynamic of marriage. But how do marriages resolve these? Sit down and talk. Sit
Mhm.
down and talk. And the marriages that succeed are when a wife knows her husband and a husband knows his wife. But if you live your life as strangers, and then it comes time when you have a problem to talk, you can't communicate because you have nothing in common. And that's the important thing. We have to develop something in common with Russian people and Chinese people. And the easiest thing that we have in common is our humanity. The easiest thing that unites us is, as John F. Kennedy said in his famous speech at the American University, that we breathe the same air, that we live on the same planet, that we want the same things.
Mhm.
I learned that when I went to Russia. I saw that the Russian people they laugh at good jokes. They scowl at bad jokes. They cry when they're sad. They cry when they're happy. Um, they like food. They like life. They like to live. They enjoy things. They want a good life for their family, and they just want what anybody wants to be respected as who they are. They're not trying to impose themselves. They're not saying that I'm better than you are. They're saying this is who I am and we want to know who you are, and then we figure out how we get along. And when you do that, it's a lesson I learned back in the 1980s and 1990s when I was training to go to war against the Soviet Union, and I was trained to kill Russians. That's it. And when you're training to kill, you dehumanize them. They become something other than human in your mind, because otherwise you'd go insane training to kill something that you loved and respected. You learn to hate and despise. But then I went to Russia, to the Soviet Union, and I met these people. I lived with them. And I'm just sitting there going, I don't want to kill these people. These are good people. I want to live in peace with these people. But it required me to actually go over there and live amongst them to develop this mindset. When we separate ourselves, when we're not talking, we're not communicating, then the ignorance comes in. We see this in the United States. We call it Russophobia when we talk about Russia, or Sinophobia when we talk about China. It's a fear of China, the fear of Russia, but that fear comes from ignorance. And the way to overcome it is to learn, but we're not allowed to right now in the United States. We're not allowed to, uh, engage with Russia, engage with China in a constructive fashion. And as a result, we sustain the ignorance, and then we're not able to solve the problems. Next thing you know, we have wars.
Mhm. Yeah. Talk communications, very important. I hope the grassroots talk and friendship, communication between Russian, American, Chinese can go up to the top of the politicians and they started to talk and understand each other. Maybe we can, prevent a World War, World War III that way.
Well, we're starting that now. That's the important thing. Having these kind of conversations is a start, and hopefully it can motivate people to become curious about China, curious about Russia, and we begin this dialogue. Because you're right, without this dialogue, there is no hope. There's no hope for peace.
Yes, definitely.
Yes, right now I know you do very big work. Uh, in next month 70th, you make the demonstration. I hope you will have successful. Russian, I with you.
Well, большое спасибо. I hope too
Пожалуйста.
that we have success because it's not about personal success. It's about saving the planet. It's about saving lives. It's about stopping a war. That's the success. If we manage to stop a war and I
Mhm.
walk away and nobody knows who I am, I'm good with that. I don't care. It's not about me. I'm not saying, oh, you have to say, no, this is about doing something that stops a war. That's it. And if we can stop that war, I win. That's all I care about. Because then I get to go play golf. I get to, watch my kids raise, have
Mhm.
families of their own. I have dogs in my house. I get to go walk my dogs and play with my dogs. Things that make me happy. Um, Go to the movies with my wife. You know, these are all the things I can't do if I'm dead, and I'll be dead if there's a nuclear war.
Yeah.
So I'm very selfish, very selfish. I want to live, and so I'm going to do everything I can to stop the war that's going to kill me.
Mhm. Well, now,
Yeah.
every moment is very precious, like for every one of us. So I really appreciate Scott and we can talk like this. I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much, and I hope we can do this again.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye
See
bye.
you next time.
Yes, ma'am.
Take care. Take care, please.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Oh, happy Thanksgiving. Don't forget that.
I actually got to go pull my turkey out of the refrigerator, begin
I
to
have
talk.
guests in my house today.
Okay. Well, go take care of your
I talk to
guests.
them. Okay.
Bye bye.
Talk to you next time.